Hey everybody, this is Dustin with the Futon Interviews. I'm here with my friend Jimi Wright. He's got an incredible story and he's hoping to earn his Ph.D. in history. So Jimi, tell me about why you want to earn your Ph.D. in history.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've always had a fascination with history. I've had a passion for it. And one day I was hanging out at my local watering hole, right? And I just kind of gotten into talking about some random trivia from World War II and getting all passionate about it, teaching it to some people who were asking questions. And at the time I was kind of conflicted about what I wanted to do in life. I was kind of going through some self-discovery. And I kind of discovered that I really didn't want to go with what I was actively studying at the time, which was epidemiology, or more specifically going for a bachelor's in applied biology on that path. So someone had said to me, well, why don't you become a professor? And I kind of thought about it, and the idea of being able to teach history and have a captive audience seemed pretty appealing. So, well, here I am. I'm about 2 years into a BA in history with the intention of getting a PhD and becoming a professor.
Now, what got you? Why history? I mean, that it's such a broad scope. You know, there's so much to history, and I wonder. Of course, you could, because of your epidemiology, you could also go into the history of epidemiology and all that kind of stuff. But why exactly the study of history? What point of history interests you most?
Definitely early American history.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intending to teach, if I'm allowed to choose, between like the settling of the United States at Plymouth, Jamestown, through to the Revolutionary War, the Constitution, the antebellum period, and then the Civil War. And
Right.
I think for me, that's kind of the era of history that I really want to focus on is our roots as a nation.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always make the argument that the Enlightenment or the Magna Carta is our roots, but I'm talking more from a practical perspective of, the founding of a nation.
Right.
I think that we can learn a lot from our past. History absolutely repeats itself. I mean, you look at recessions, economic throughout history, and they tend to follow a pretty cyclic path.
Right.
We can always predict when it's getting close.
Yeah.
So we learn a lot through the cycle of history. And when necessary, I mean, talking about, genocide in the 1900s, we learn to look at the warning signs of, what's a rising absolute leader like that with such evil intentions, and how can we prevent that from happening now that we've seen it before, we know the signs, and we know what happens when they're allowed to get into a position of power.
Yeah.
So, kind of the too long didn't read.
Yeah.
I think we can learn a lot from the cycle of history, knowing that it repeats itself, and using that knowledge to try and prevent bad events from happening in history to us.
Yeah.
And we can learn a lot from our roots as a nation,
Yeah.
The guarantees of rights, what makes America America, because I think we really need to focus on that going forward as we shape policy, as we interact in a brave new world of globalization and trade.
Right. Now, what would you say to somebody who says, well, history does repeat, but when you're in the time of history, all these other actors like state actors, nation state actors, you have intelligence community, you have all these different sorts of players in the process of history repeating, but the people know that history is repeating, but are unable to do anything about it because, the players at play are making this game, the disenfranchised are not able to make any actions as far as what's actually happening in the history repeat. I don't know.
I think I understand what you're asking. Well, first off, you're putting me on the spot here, and I appreciate that. I always love a challenge.
Yeah, we don't have to go into
No, please, by all means. I think I've got the best answer I can muster in the period of listening. And that is, you get all these state actors, you talk about intelligence agencies, you talk about people are different, cultures change. And I would go back to an old saying that, a lot of people now know from Fallout, so I appreciate that, and that's war never changes.
Okay.
People change, names change, agendas don't change. At the end of the day, people who were fighting the Revolutionary War, people who were fighting in Korea, people who were fighting in Afghanistan, the agenda of those wars, why we were there, what we were doing, is generally going to fall within a set range of possibilities. And so because a nation is only going to act in its own interest, that limits what it's going to do. It kind of sets up a predictability. And when you establish that, history is going to repeat itself one way or another. It may not be exact in like an exact mirror reflection, but it's about locating the warning signs from the fact that we know an agenda is always going to be about the same for a nation, and then encouraging the good, discouraging the evil.
Mm-hmm. So what I gather from that is, so we know that history has repeated, but we can't change the fact that we're in that history.
No.
But for instance, we can look at the French Revolution,
Yes.
right? And we can ascertain, like, this happened then, so this is a probability today.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And I mean, the French Revolution and the Communist Revolution in Russia, that then became the Soviet Union, of course, without going into specifics and talking about names and all that, there are common themes in revolution. I remember listening to a lecture, and they had talked about how revolution is like a fever, like the immune response. There's stages, and it reaches an outcome. And there's kind of a horseshoe theory, which is that over time, politics will just kind of go back and forth, the pendulum, whatever. But yeah, there's definitely warning signs to revolution. There are inherent stages to revolution. Of course, there's always going to be a range in how they express themselves, but it's always going to fall into that range.
Yeah.
So with revolution, we can always kind of predict a track that it's going to go down, or at least set up a probability map.
Right.
Just from the warning signs and, kind of synthesizing predictions based on the historical context, historical evidence.
Now, okay, I know we're going to get to your story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get to it, but I want to pick your brain a little bit.
Please.
So, with this revolution, and now that we see, China has these robot soldiers.
I'm not familiar with robot soldiers.
Okay.
Is that going to be important, or is it just
Well, it's just kind of like a futuristic type of scenario. Like,
okay.
For instance, with the artificial intelligence, the data mining, the personality profiles of basically everybody who uses social media.
Right.
All these different things. Do you see, like, perhaps either they use AI to quell a revolution, or they use AI to start a revolution, based on the social media profiles of people that are using social media? I know you weren't expecting this.
All right. So the first hitch here is I really don't have any social media activity.
Right.
I don't have a Facebook. I don't have an Instagram. I don't. And it's not putting down people to do. I think it's a really valuable resource for connecting. I just don't need it.
Do you see where they could use that for some type of purpose in a possible way?
So I forget if it was the late 90s, early 2000s, but DARPA had come out with a project called LifeLog.
Uh-huh.
And what that was focused on doing was basically, it was an early kind of dumb AI in a sense that it followed like an algorithm but was able to kind of do predictions.
Yeah.
And it would synthesize predictions of a person's behavioral patterns, ideological shifts, stuff like that. And it would be like a full profile built from their social media activity, online activity, purchases, banking history, basically just an intrusive look at their footprint digitally, and then creating a full profile to determine ideology, behavior. which is terrifying because that kind of, it's the early signs of that. I think it was a Stallone movie.
Yeah.
With the whole murder, death, kill.
Oh, yeah.
But the plot of those movies where it's like, we're going to arrest you before you commit the crime because we know you're going to do it.
Right, like Minority Report, basically.
Minority Report was Tom Cruise, right?
Yeah, Tom Cruise, yeah.
That's it. So that's what I would say about social media, and that's the dangers of kind of integrating culture with technology in terms of socializing this and stuff. I think it divides us just as much as it connects us.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that I can get on the horn with someone who's living in China right now and talk to them, I think is incredible. But at the same time, the fact that now anyone around the world can get their hands on your data if they try hard enough poses unique and burgeoning threats to individuals as technology develops further and further.
Now I did all that as a test because
you're on the war side still, right?
well, I wanted to tell you I did that as a test because I know you're a brilliant guy, and I wanted to see other people see how brilliant you are.
There are people out there that are much more professional than me, and I hope that I have not offended their sensibilities with my off-the-cusp logic. So if there's some professors out there that are now saying that I should never teach, I'm sorry. I promise I'll get better.
No, nothing you said is nothing you said is wrong.
All right.
But let's get into how you came about as the person you are today, because let's see, you're wanting to be a Ph.D. student and you're very intelligent. Now, how did you go? Like, tell me about your childhood and that type of stuff. You know, first of all, where are you from? I know you're in Florida now, but where are you from?
So I was born in Clearwater, Florida.
Okay.
Which, quick fun fact about that, Scientology owns the entire downtown.
Okay.
So I thought that was a pretty neat fact.
Yeah.
They're not just in LA, they're in Florida too.
Right. Don't say too much on them. They'll block you out of Hollywood.
I'm not saying anything offensive, I'm just saying they're there. I'm being careful. But so I was born there and I spent, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And then my parents got divorced after moving to Milford, Connecticut, which was my mom's hometown, to try and make it work one last time.
Right.
So the divorce went down, and I was probably 5.
Yeah.
And then within a year of that, I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD.
Yeah.
Specifically Asperger's syndrome, but nowadays I've noticed that the neurological, psychological communities have moved away from specifically defining Asperger's, and now they just say on the high-functioning end of the autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
So I've had some interesting experiences in life, and obviously autism alone is not what defines my personality. It shapes some of my perspectives.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sure it shapes some of the hobbies I have. You know, I'm not inclined to go to a club that's far too loud for me.
Right.
So I enjoy more introverted activities like reading. I'm big on writing.
Yeah.
Historic fiction has been an interest of mine since I decided to move into that professorship career route. And I've always very much enjoyed science fiction. But I digress.
Yeah. Now you've told me a lot about, this type of work you did as a child, raising funds and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
From what I hear, your mother is a great woman as far as everything she's done,
Absolutely.
and you as well. I mean, tell them about how you raised money and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, to get into that, I kind of have to establish the first year, and that first fundraiser was actually for my benefit. So, I was not well off as a kid. I had terrible coordination. My spatial processing, absolutely terrible. So I could not really run without looking like some wounded ostrich.
Yeah.
So I needed to get some kind of outside help to develop those skills. And then, of course, when you have autism, it's kind of like almost a rewiring of the brain, so that needs to be addressed. And then there's the social skills as well, which I'll get into later. That's a whole other beast. But in terms of the more functional things, there was a place called the Empowered Learning Center, and they were in Stamford, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And they were an experimental kind of neurological therapeutic thing.
Right.
I don't know the exact words. It's getting into the fine details of the science now.
Yeah.
But they would do activities like put me on a trampoline and have me steadily bounce. And on the wall there would be papers with like red square, green triangle, and there'd be a radio that played a deep voice that would say green.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have to find green while you're bouncing and keep your eye on it. And then it'd say square, so you'd have to go to the square. So what it was doing was conditioning you to take instruction and differentiate between color and shape without getting confused, and at the same time perform those motor functions like bouncing, and then getting more and more precise on the motor functions over time. And that teaches you to be coordinated. You know, the old you can't chew bubble gum and walk and whatever. So it focused on that. We used mnemonic devices to remember large segments of information, like all of the U.S. presidents. And they would use a piece of art, like a man carrying a bunch of laundry, and that's Washington, George Washington.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And you would go down this line of pictures, and it was just a big, long piece of paper with all of it on it.
Wow.
And you would use that as a mnemonic device over time, and then, you know, when it got to that point, I could name them all.
Wow.
And I thought that was really great. So the Empowered Learning Center empowered me to be more coordinated and more functional in that aspect. Of course, the social thing is different, but it was very expensive, being an experimental treatment therapy. So what my mom needed to do was put together a fundraiser for me. She was working at Martini's at the time as a bartender, and had convinced the manager there to basically let her use the space for a night. We got some local bands who volunteered to just go and play. We had some people who donated items for raffles, and we kind of combined that all together with a door fee, a portion of the drinks and stuff, and it came together to be enough to pay for me to enroll in the Empowered Learning Center. And the bands came to us afterwards, specifically my mom at the time, because I was only like 6 or 7. And they said, that was fun, when do we do it again?
That's great.
My mom's like, well, you know, we have all the money we need, you know?
Yeah.
But Mom and I had just watched a movie called Pay It Forward, which may have been a bit darker for someone of my age, but at the same time, she hadn't seen it before, and it was supposed to be a touching message about, you know, the old social concept of don't pay it back, pay it forward.
Yeah.
So I said, why don't we pay it forward? And next thing you know, we found it, instead of Jam for Jimmy, it was Jam for Jimmy's Friends.
That's amazing.
We spent most of that at the Orange Ale House in Orange, Connecticut.
Yeah.
We had so many bands that wanted to come and play for us that we had to turn some down until next year, you know.
Wow. Wow.
We had Dan Patrick, you know, with the sportscaster. He himself came and donated, I believe it was a headset and a microphone, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. We had local photographers come and donate their works. We had skydiving tickets.
Wow.
So some big value items that were donated to us for free, just, you know, for the cause of helping children with special needs. And as we developed over the years, we did this 12 years annually. We sponsored upwards of 15 children with varying special needs, from Down syndrome to cerebral palsy to terminal muscular dystrophy to autism. And we would use the funds raised to pay for their various medical expenses. You know, some people needed therapy, wheelchair counseling. We would pay for their enrollment in a local summer camp called Camp Happiness. I'm not sure if they're still running today, but it was a recreational summer camp. It was a day camp, and it was geared towards children with special needs. They would do fun events like bringing in a carnival day with an inflatable water slide, fire truck day, because one of the volunteer counselors there was working for the department. So they came with fire trucks to spray us all down, you know?
That's awesome. Now, did you want...
A little more to the
Okay, go for it.
So in addition to sponsoring 15 kids, paying for all of that, we took them on fun trips throughout the year. Apple picking, because that's a peaceful activity in an orchard. We could organize them, keep them together. Some of the higher volume items were like baseball games and hockey games, and to offset that, we would get the box up top. So it was a closed door.
That's big.
Yeah, and they loved it. It was an opportunity for them to go out and do these activities that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do or handle, because we were actively considering interventions and kind of pre-planning with them in mind. Horseback riding, guiding around in a circle, and we would donate whatever we had left, aside from like keeping some of the funds for like the next year's enrollments and stuff, to charities, various charities. As a kid, I had a lot of exposure to being on the news. I was on New York local news, CT local news, radio, newspapers.
Wow, that is awesome.
So I got used to public speaking from a young age, and my mom and I worked very hard for Jump for Jimmy's Friends. I'd say it's one of my proudest achievements in life to date, even though I was still a kid and it was just kind of helping out. And we won a lot of awards for it as well. We won the Armin and Bailey Community Service Award. I think it was silver. And my work, and my mom's work as well, and my, I don't want to say recovery, but my kind of growing out of autism, growing into a more socialized state where I was able to interact, make friends. It's kind of a coming of age and a story of, I guess, perseverance. There was a lot of suffering, a lot of bullying, and I came out okay.
Right.
I actually graduated the spectrum before I moved to Florida.
Wow.
So what that means is essentially a psychiatrist could not diagnose me with autism if they sat down with me. And I won the Mayor's Youth Award, Milford's Promise, and I'm just very proud of the fundraiser.
I talked to my mom about you, and I was telling her what an incredible story this is. And she's a school psychologist, and I told her, he graduated out of autism. And she said that is so rare, so rare, that she was like, wow, he does have an incredible story.
That's part of why I really wanted to have a chance to talk about this today. Was I'm in a very unique situation where I have a lot of practice with writing and reading and public speaking, so I like to think of myself as articulate. At least that's how I hear myself. And that's afforded me an opportunity to be able to speak about what it's like to have autism. I'm high functioning enough to explain it, and I have the articulation to hopefully give perspective while I'm trying to explain. And I want to use that to advocate and to do public speaking on the experience in my life.
Now, would you say that one of the things I'm thinking that you could do, I don't know whether you would want to in the future, but I'm thinking maybe one of these days you could combine, lecturing, about autism, and then also the nonprofit fundraising as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of partnership opportunities that could be set up. I could maybe act as a liaison between the university, or specifically maybe have a hand in assisting whatever disability resource center, that's the U.S. term, but I don't know if that's broader. Assisting that kind of department in the university with kind of establishing interventions in the classroom, advocating on behalf of my students, making sure that schools or whatever institution I'm with is compliant with federal provisions that special needs services need to be provided. I mean, can we talk about schools? Can we talk about this?
Go for it.
This is just like, I can't go surface level with this because it's one of the most corrupted aspects of the American education system that I can think of. And the fact of the matter is, and this is at least true when I was growing up, and from everything I've heard, this is still mostly true today. Most institutions do not want to put forth the effort to assist children with special needs. We saw back in the 1900s that they had special schools for special children, you know, and keeping kids with special needs away from the mainstream exacerbates their disorders. Because, I mean, look at me. I was able to socialize, I was able to graduate the spectrum only because I was afforded a mainstream education, vast opportunities to collaborate with my peers, work with people, make friends, do extracurriculars, and be exposed to large crowds with the fundraiser and stuff, public speaking. I had to keep my head on a swivel with that.
Yeah.
So learning all of that through mainstream is what socializes kids with special needs to maybe be self-sufficient in life, or at least hold down a proper employment and be contributing members of society, because the worst thing we can do is look at people who are unique, special, and arguably gifted, right? I mean, I think that's true in my case. It helps me remember things.
Right.
And to look at them and say, you're inferior. Well, I don't think so. I think we have savant syndrome. I mean, some of the most intelligent people in their fields are autistic. Thomas Jefferson spoke 7 languages, wrote the Declaration of Independence. I mean, stark political figure, one of the most recognized American figures in history. The historians believe he was autistic. Albert Einstein, absolutely autistic. No question.
He couldn't even comb his hair.
Yeah, I saw the picture. I love it. But I mean, Albert Einstein, I'd love to sit down with that man.
Yeah.
What a crazy character. And I'm sure Thomas Edison, I remember reading Nikola Tesla, I think. That makes sense. Yeah. He really didn't do well with the social aspect.
Well, you know, also, you know, talking about the education system and how it's so corrupted. My mother, I believe, actually got into school psychology because I also have I have a number of things wrong with me, but you know that. Yeah. But I was high functioning autistic before they even. I was born in 1985, so they didn't even really know, you know, what was wrong. And she got into it, I think, because of me, because she wanted to know, you know, what was going on with me as well as everything else. And from what I understand, I'm not going to put words in my mother's mouth because she still has a professional reputation and everything.
We'll call it paraphrasing.
Right. But from what I understand from her is that these schools the teachers want to put kids in special education because if they're disruptive or anything like that, they want to put them in special education because then they get them out of their classroom.
I think that's becoming less and less true.
But here's the other thing is that the other thing is that all these administrators and that type of stuff want to basically, you know, just they don't give the funding to the special education, you know, and they want everything to just like be corrupted, you know?
I think a lot of the blame lies with administration more than teaching professionals. I can't speak to what it's like in a school. I can only speak to what my experiences were. Were there teachers who would have absolutely loved to have seen me thrown out of the class and never have to deal with me again? Absolutely no, no question. But I often had very supportive teachers. I had teachers who, when I came into the class, even if I'd been a little shithead the day before, they would greet me with a smile and they would treat me like everyone else.
Basically what I'm trying to say here is that teachers, the teachers do not want, they don't take the kid as, they don't take the different levels of like how they interact and that kind of stuff. And they want everybody to be cookie cutter, you know, throughout the whole system. You know?
That again, I think falls with the administration and with policy. Policy more than anything. I don't think you become a teacher because you want to give a dry lecture. I don't think there's any teacher in the world who decided to become a teaching professional because they wanted to sit in front of a class with a monotone voice and go off a script.
Right.
People want to teach
Yeah.
because they want to excite people about what they love.
Right.
So teachers don't want to throw anyone out of their class. I don't think that's usually true. I think we are refusing on the administrative side and around a little bit to provide the necessary resources to accommodate and intervene with children who have special needs. And that puts way too much stress on the teacher. And that's totally fair.
Better said than what I could have said. Yeah.
And that's totally fair because a teacher already has to run, excuse me, teacher already has to run a class of kids.
Right.
They have a lot on their plate.
Yeah.
It isn't fair to dump everything on them, and I can understand them being overwhelmed. What we need to do is get more paraprofessionals, more speech language professionals, or not professionals, pathologists, speech therapists.
Yeah.
Because my research, what I was able to determine through interviews for several finals that I've done, is that speech therapists aid not only people with stutters and speech impediments, but also English learners. So that's an intervention that you can have on standby for children who are new to the country, for children who are below on literacy, language development, and the speech language pathologist can interact and convene with the paraprofessional to establish in-class interventions that are specific to that student. So what we need to do is do more scaffolding, get more interventions in place, get more resources in place, and stop being cheap.
Yeah.
Stop being cheap and stop being lazy.
Well, here's the other thing. If you want to look at it from an eagle-eye view, what if we put money that we spend on defense industry, because that's like $707 billion, And I love the military. A lot of my writing is... Oh, yeah.
Tom Clancy's a big inspiration. I interview veterans every day for my writing.
I think as a veteran, a lot of us veterans know there's way too much spent on defense.
Too much. And I think part of that is the military-industrial complex. We're getting into contracts. So, for instance, I'm going to use one item as an example, but this is reflective of the entire military economy. It's called a JFAC. I know it's IFAC, Infantry First Aid Kit, but apparently it's different in the Air Force. On the market, it runs for about $60. It's got all your standard tools, some lubricating gel, packing bandage, elastic bandage, all that stuff. $60 is a pretty fair price for all those materials. The military entered into a contract where they are buying each individual unit for a value of $300.
Wow.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And our taxes are paying for it because we are entering into these...
Yeah, and $300 doesn't seem like a lot, but then you multiply that by a million.
Every single service member gets a first aid kit, I believe. At least the infantry. All of the infantry does.
Yeah.
So $300 per person. It takes... I watched a movie the other day. It takes $17,000 to arm a single United States infantryman for the Army, I believe.
Yeah.
And that was as of like 10 years ago. I'm sure it's only inflated more.
Yeah.
And we enter into these contracts where we stay with them for 30 years. And just for inflation. So we're just paying more and more and more.
Yeah.
We need to go back to focusing on encouraging manufacturing. I think specifically at the small business level, we need to broaden out the orders that we use for parts so that no single set of companies can dominate that and just force the military into these contracts. And we need to be more responsible with our spending. There's no reason that it should have to be that much every year, especially considering we are officially not a nation at war.
Yeah.
And, a lot of our intervention in the Middle East is focused on counterinsurgency, not conventional warfare. It's focused on the individual infantry. The Marine Corps phased out tanks for exactly that reason. We can't really use tanks anymore because we're going door to door.
Yeah.
And, being in an urban setting, I believe I read, is one of the most dangerous environments for armor. So...
Now, as a historian... I think you'll have some insight into this. I read this article a long time ago, but it said basically except for the ships that have the aircraft carriers, basically.
The aircraft carriers.
Besides aircraft carriers, there's really no need for all these other types of ships. Like if you look at Russia and all these other militaries, they don't have so many as many ships as we do.
Yeah.
But then again, we're an empire.
Yeah, we're very much an empire.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
Okay, I'm gonna kind of be talking out of my ass here.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna disclaim that. But I truly believe there's plenty of value in a diversified naval fleet. I mean, submarines serve a function that an aircraft carrier simply can't.
Right.
They infiltrate, especially if it's a nuclear submarine. They're
Mm-hmm.
able to infiltrate and pose a nuclear threat to key strategic opponents. With China specifically, a lot of people are afraid of war with China. I'm not. They have a lot of people. They don't have a lot of good tech. We outshadow them in that. And furthermore, their economy is entirely localized on the coast.
Okay.
One strategic attack, we cripple their industry. Where's their production? How are they going to build guns? They're done. I think Russia is the much greater threat.
Yeah.
And I think China also, we're China's bitch.
Okay.
And I'm a patriotic guy. I love
yeah.
America. There's a reason I want to teach the Constitution and history. But we are economically China's bitch. I mean, we are in so much debt that debt is no longer a concept. Nobody could come and collect.
We're owned by them.
So I don't know what we're going to do with China. My personal hope is that the one-party system falls.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Hong Kong, I pray, that Hong Kong is that spark.
Yeah.
Or that they continue to destabilize, or it goes along the track that it's currently going, where the CCP is starting to slowly integrate privatization. So now you can own your home.
Wow.
You are the owner of your home until you die. But if they're slowly starting to introduce these concepts, I'm wondering if that's kind of a... Oh, shoot. What was the period in Russia where they were starting...
The Bolshevik?
It was when they were... The decline of the Communist Party.
Okay.
And they were starting to, allow freedom of press. Glasnost?
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Glasnost and Perestroika.
Okay.
That's it. I wonder if maybe this is kind of another glasnost and perestroika for China. Over time, we may see more of that. Or if this is just kind of a carrot on a stick. Either way, I'm hoping that these subtle integrations start to give people an idea of freedom, liberty, and you start to see mass protests that can no longer be quelled by censorship and violent force.
Now, what I've come to understand is that there's going to be kind of, as far as international relations is concerned, systems and governance and all that kind of stuff, and how they whatever. But what I've come to understand is there's going to be kind of a mixing of democratic systems and communism and socialism, all these types of systems, that it's going to be a mixing of it, even though we call it one thing or the other. Kind of like what has happened in the U.S. With third-party type things.
Like lobbyists?
With third-party type things, telling you what you can and cannot say. Like, for instance, platforms telling you what you can and cannot say.
Okay, so like major media groups.
Right.
I mean, fact of the matter is, major media is a monopoly. There's a couple companies that own everything.
Right. But do you see where there's kind of a...
well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It ties in with that. It's corporatism. So if you have a monopoly on media where only a few aristocrats, I mean, there's no better word, oligarchs maybe, can determine what messages the public hears with very little oversight. I mean, there's the FCC and all that, but a lot of the time, fake news. It's true. I mean, there's plenty of articles, especially with internet and shit posts and stuff. I mean, look at The Onion. How many times have you seen an Onion article that's like, oh, I thought that was real?
I know.
So it's deceptive. There's no oversight. There's no peer review prior to airing that stuff. And they can fit their message to fit whatever agenda they want.
Now, okay, so let's see. Okay, now we're going back to you.
Okay,
all right?
Back to me. Rolling back around.
Where do you see yourself in 10, 20 years? Have I already asked that? Or?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Where do I see myself in 10, 20 years? Tenured professor in an esteemed university, hopefully an established university, I don't know where I'm going to be. It's a highly competitive field. If I'm going to be getting the job, I need to be ready to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And if Alaska's like, we'll pay you $150,000 a year, come teach for us, I'll go.
Yeah.
I don't like the cold, but shoot, $150,000 a year, I'll get a hot tub and a heated balcony, heated driveway, and it won't bother me. So I'm hoping to do something like that. I want to be involved in symposiums. I want to be involved as a consultant for either like movies, books, coming out. Someone wants to do a movie on the Revolution. Call me up, like, hey, can you go over the script? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Expeditions, if there's anything like that, kind of looking at historical sites, I'd love to be involved in that. And I think above all, I'd love to teach the future generation of historians, provide my unique perspectives, very much with the message of, this is my experience, your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
One of my history teachers in high school, that was his quote, and it stuck with me. I absolutely believe that giving our own unique perspectives on history is important, because if everybody has a piece of the puzzle, you have to fit them together, and you can only do that by communicating.
Right.
And I don't pretend to have all the answers.
Yeah.
I try to stumble my way through life and figure out as much as I can. And I figure if everyone does that, then we'll all be able to get a patchwork of knowledge that's pretty complete.
Yeah. Now, this is going to be kind of what you said there about the, showing our history.
Yeah.
What do you think the world would have lost if we hadn't had Anne Frank, and her diary? What do you think, as far as a historical perspective, if we never had that diary, what would we have lost? We would have lost a lot, right?
Anne Frank's diary, and I could be completely wrong, this is my understanding of it, was instrumental in bringing knowledge of the gruesome details of the Holocaust into popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
However, if Anne Frank had never existed, and the Holocaust had still happened, there were a lot of survivors.
Okay.
We have a very established historical record of what was going on in those camps, because a lot of those survivors talked, a lot of those survivors went and became public speakers. And there's other surviving records and diaries that weren't just Anne Frank's. Hers was just the most complete, and I would say the most heart-wrenching.
The thing is I remember I was at Northeast Texas Community College, or Northeast Texas Community College, and our history professor, he had us go watch the seminar, and there was a Jewish gentleman there who had gone through the Holocaust, and he was telling us all the stories. But the one thing that I remember to this day from his speech, and this has stuck with me for a lifetime, 30 years or so now, or however long it has been, but he said, hate only begets hate.
Yeah.
And I thought that puts it so bluntly and so graciously, and everything else. He said, hate begets hate, so I don't hate the Nazis for what they did, and I thought that was one of the most beautiful things, for somebody to go through that and then not hate those people for that. And
it's touching.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Jewish community was very much kind of in the route of rather than punish, let's learn from this, let's make sure it never happens again. There is a little known historical piece. Not all of the Jews were peaceful after the war, believe it or not.
Right.
There was a movement. and the movement was basically, we want to kill 6 million Germans.
Wow.
Very small, and not at all reflective of the opinions of the Judaistic community. Very much the work of a few people of a group that had suffered and were looking for revenge over justice, you know. And on the one hand, I understand, and the historical context is important. On the other hand, there's no excuse for genocide, even if it's a retaliation.
Right.
You know, because if everyone genocides everyone, there's no one left.
Well, I think
and that's like you said, hate begets hate.
Yeah,
violence begets violence.
I've studied because I also took this world religions class, and you know, there's a lot of I think there's a beauty to the Judaism.
I think there's a beauty to all of the Abrahamic things.
There's this one thing in Judaism called Tikkun Olam, and it basically means we're here to repair the world, or not we're here, but it basically means repair the world. So when you go out into the world, it's just like in Christianity and other religions where you do good deeds, you know, but just the idea that they had a word for repairing the world, you know, I think is reflective of, you know, not only of Judaism, but of all religions, all serious religions. There's this need to repair the world. Yeah. You know, so even though
how they do it, that's going to differ.
Yeah. Right.
I think it is an established premise for most, if not all, religions.
Right.
You know, the goal is not to end the world. It's we want to fix it, make it a better place.
Right. Exactly.
For ourselves and our progeny.
Yeah. So, man, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been absolutely fun. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I would love to do it again too, man. Great interview and everything.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you guys, and hit that like button and follow button. And also, I'm sorry about the auto director on this camera system doesn't really go to the person at the right time and that kind of stuff. So if you're mad about the auto director, just know I am too. All right. Thank you guys. See ya.